Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'm very privileged to be here, and in particular, I'm happy to talk about the topic I'm going to talk about today, which is basic income, with a bunch of people who's interested in community and in health, and it will be clear why I think those themes are connected. So today, I'm going to talk about why basic income has become a very popular topic now. I'll tell you why it's a very old idea, and I'll talk a little bit about different narratives that we can provide to justify and explain why basic income is important. And I'm in particular going to emphasize a narrative that I think is very compelling at the moment, which is that basic income is a democratic response to the crisis in governance that we face today. And I've heard so many of you speak about that crisis in governance, which I see very much related with the way systems are dysfunctioning today. Food systems, economic systems, social relations, dysfunctioning because of a lack of stable security at the bottom of society, because of the lack of mechanisms of inclusion within society that allow us to slow things down and think differently about what we're doing. And what's resonated from one presentation to another is this sense of a need to slow down. But many of you have talked about slowing down at the level of community, the level of the individual taking that, taking permission to do that or choosing to do that in his or her life. What we haven't talked about, but which is very important, is how we slow the systems that we're in down so that we can take those choices and make those choices in our lives. And that's what basic income is all about. What is a basic income? And I'm taking a definition from a network that I'm a member of. I'm proud to be a member of. I have been for 16 years, called Basic Income Network. And we define basic income as a periodic cash payment unconditionally delivered to all on an individual basis without means test or work requirement. And of course, you can recognize from this description that that is rather different from the way in which we pay out anti-poverty grants today, which is all based on behavior conditionality, proving that you're willing to work, proving that you're looking for a job, and you to have the right attitude and so on. And of course, it's means tested, so that we think about giving people security only when it's too late, when people have failed in the system. And what basic income is all about is generating an adjustment mechanism within society, within the economy, so that individuals can take control of their lives, their developmental trajectories, and adjust when they need to, not when it's too late and the state gives you a handout. So a basic income is a lifelong and permanent subsistence grant or more, but at least a subsistence grant for everyone, no matter your income, no matter your status, no matter your gender. Usually we think that you might qualify in terms of residence in a place for a certain amount of time, but no other qualification. And the idea is to give everyone a sense of financial stability and economic security as a foundation for making choices in your lives. In 2016, the basic income idea became very popular, and I expect a lot of you. How many of you know what a basic income is? Not that many. Okay, maybe about 20%. Anyway, it has become a very popular political idea, whereas before 2016 it was a philosophical idea entertained by economists and philosophers in academic circles. And it became popular through, or well known, through a referendum that was held in Switzerland for or against a basic income, which was lost, but we still think that actually it was a success for the basic income movement, because 23% of those who voted actually thought that such a crazy thing was something that they would be willing to support. We also think that possibly the reason why basic income was not voted for in Switzerland at the time was that it was set at a very high level. 2,250 euros per month is somewhat above subsistence level, and that possibly scared people off. We have experiments going on with basic income, or versions of basic income, I should say, in several places around the world. Finland has started a basic income experiment. They call it, it's a version of basic income. In January this year, they're going to run it for 2 years. And what that is a subsistence grant without conditionality. So basically what they've decided to do is take a bunch of people, lift the conditionalities, and see what happens whether those people feel motivated, whether those people have better health outcomes. And what that represents for those of us who are interested in basic income is a recognition at the political level that something is dysfunctioning in the way in which we are supporting people in society today. So we think that's very important. There's been some research done. There was a data that looked at I think 10,000 people across Europe, 64% of which said they would support a basic income and they would still work if they got a basic income tomorrow. Of course, that's not exactly a scientific result in the sense that that's just what people said they intended and how they felt about a basic income. But the question is, how should we think about a basic income? How should we make it or understand it as something that is a natural outgrowth of things we're already doing? Is basic income really such a radical idea? Should we think about it as simply a way to save capitalism? Or should we think about it instead as something that we already recognize to be important, but we just haven't undertaken so far? It's important to understand basic income is not a new idea. And I want to talk just about two persons that you may have heard about. Certainly the first one, Thomas Paine, the English activist and philosopher. And he advocated for something like a basic income. And his argument in the 1790s was that basic income or something like it was necessary as a form of compensation for access to common property. So as property was being taken over privately and the commons was being colonized, it was just cause to give everyone some alternative security as compensation. Hollenberg, he was a Danish painter who wrote in the 1930s, and he thought of basic income as a humanist way of changing society from within. He was also very much into alternative education, the folk school movement it is very strong in the Nordic countries. And he saw basic income as a way of allowing communities to grow in a different way, allowing time to be dedicated to education and community living and the social good. And he also saw it as a form of radical self-governance at the local level. And lastly, he saw a basic income as a means for everyone to enjoy the fruits of what he called the technological inheritance. So already in the 1930s, he believed it was possible to live with the available technology at the time in a different way. Now, in many ways, I think these arguments for compensation, basic income as a sort of compensation, or basic income as a simplification, enjoying what's already there, they don't go far enough. And actually, we need to think about basic income as something more than that, as a way to change the way we govern our societies today. The basic income movement has been in existence for several hundred years, if you go back to Paine, but in a contemporary sense, there's been a bunch of activists going around the globe arguing for basic income since the 1970s, and some of those activists are actually very prominent Nobel Prize winners who have been interested in versions of the idea, including Milton Friedman, who is better known for being an advocate of a form of neoliberal economics. He advocated for something he called a negative income tax, the NIT, and his case for the negative income tax, which essentially involved allowing people to keep the tax allowance that everyone gets as a form of income, and thereby have some sort of financial security. His argument was essentially a humanist one. He argued that the basic income was necessary to stabilize the economic unit within the economy and allow the individual to be independent and dignified, because without that independence and dignity, actually the big marketplace that he was an advocate of doesn't work. So even someone with whom I don't necessarily agree in terms of his economics acknowledged the need to stabilize the fundamental unit of the economy, which is the human being. Also in Europe in the 1970s, there were debates about basic income in the Nordic countries where I'm from. It was thought about as a way of allowing more sabbatical time within a person's working life. Take time out when you need to. Self-adjust when you need to within the economy without having to ask, as some other people were saying, permission to do that. A basic income allows self-governance And so this was a prominent idea in the 1970s. The Basic Income Earth Network that I'm a member of and currently I chair was formed in 1986 amongst a bunch of academics and activists and policymakers. And last year we became a legal charity in Brussels. This year we've moved to London. And the Basic Income Earth Network has essentially been a platform for debate since then about different versions and reasons for basic income, long before it became this political, topical point of public policy alternative that exists today. And if you look at the series of arguments that have been made for basic income, they've moved over time in a way which I think shows how we need to change the argument. So in the 1990s, early 2000s, it was all about ending poverty, how to make anti-poverty grants more stable. Then it became about precarious labor, the labor market generating 0-hours jobs, generating precariousness, needed to be somehow filled with some sort of glue at the bottom to enable this flexibility to be a little bit more secure. And then finally, now we see the argument that basic income is a necessary response to automation because there'll be an end of work. Again, I think those arguments are not really radical enough, and we need to understand there's something much more fundamental at stake in terms of how we govern the systems that we already have and how we make those systems less of a source of stress and how we enable people to spend their time differently. So why basic income? Not because it's a radical alternative, because I don't think it is. I think it's a natural outgrowth of things we're already doing. We just need to do them a little bit differently. No business as usual, because we're not trying to save capitalism in its current form, because it's not working, but really as a chance to pause and think about why we are paying anti-poverty grants in the way that we are by seeking to control how people behave or what jobs they take or how many hours they work exactly and so on, which frankly is pretty inconsistent because we only use the state to do that when people are in a crisis. We don't do that when they're functioning well. Why would we seek to control people when they are in most need of our help? So just a few facts about basic income, which I think is important that people understand. Basic income is not about stopping work or separating income from work entirely. It just means allowing people, as the logo of Poulain suggests, to have something shared in common that is safe and permanent and secure, and that allows people to make more autonomous choices. And on that basis, lifestyles may differ and what people earn from work may differ, although we could also have a discussion about distribution. But basic income does not require a massive redistribution. It just requires that we agree we all deserve something unconditionally in terms of a basic income. In the same way that we have already made a commitment to other universal services that we don't ask anyone to perform in a particular way to access. So we've already made a commitment to universal health in most European countries. We've already made a commitment to universal schooling. And we don't ask families to perform in a certain way. We don't ask people to live healthily, in particular, to access healthcare. So why would we ask people to behave in a particular way to enjoy basic subsistence? It's inconsistent, and it's something we need to change. What basic income is about independence. So it's about giving people the tool to become self-governing individuals. And I have here a word that I've tried to translate from the Danish language, because in Denmark we have two words for independence. One word signifies non-dependence, being an autonomous individual and not depending on anything. And the other word for independence means to stand in yourself, to be centered in yourself. And that is that's the kind of independence that basic income can allow people to enjoy, that they can become self-standing in themselves, govern themselves without having to think about why they're doing what they're doing to serve some other purpose external to their own lives and to the rhythm of their lives. So basic income is not about business as usual or being able to transact in the market the way we're doing currently. It's actually about slowing down. There's a famous economist called Kahneman who wrote a book you may all know about, I don't know, where he distinguished between slow thinking and fast thinking. And slow thinking is the thinking that you are only able to do when you slow down. And he did some great experiments in which he showed that people, when they have to think about a difficult problem, or they have to think very logically about something, or they have to deliberate in their mind, they physically slow down. And you cannot do that when you're moving too fast. You cannot do that when you've got too many tasks that you're preoccupied with. So you physically slow down. He called it System 2. System 1 is fast thinking. Fast thinking is when you're moving about and you're having to do things very quickly, and you are externally motivated somehow by necessity to do certain things. But the key point of his work is that you're less productive when you're in thinking 1 mode. You're more productive, paradoxically, when you slow down, right? And in one of his books about slow thinking, fast thinking, he said, well, the next step in our research is to figure out, how does this connect with governance? How does this connect with society and institutions, and how we design our institutions? And basic income is the way it connects, to my mind. When we changed the fundamental basis of the institutions in society so that individuals can control the rhythm of their lives, can change the social relations in their lives by not having to depend on other people for negative reasons, then deliberation, social relations can change. And that is the main, I think, humanistic argument for basic income that we need to make. It's not about changing the system entirely, it's simply about governing what we already have in a slightly different way. And I've written about that quite extensively. I argue that the democratic case for basic income is not actually about poverty, because we're not just going to give basic income to the poor, right? We're going to give a basic income to everyone. It's about security. Because even if you have money and you've got a great job, if you don't have a basic income, then you'll have to worry about becoming poor. So you are poor because you are still insecure in your job, in your secure job, right? So basic income is not about poverty. It's about equal standing, and it's about security. It's about what I call developmental freedom, which is a precondition for the freedom we know better in common discourse, which is transactional freedom, freedom to choose, freedom to exit, freedom to move. Developmental freedom, the freedom to do things to your own rhythm, is a precondition for that other freedom that basic income is a part of recognizing. And as I said before, basic income is not radical, because in many ways it's simply a return to a commitment we already made. A commitment which in the last 30 years we have reneged upon, because we increasingly have started to govern access to basic security through sanctions. I was going to talk today about the sanctions regime. I haven't had time, but let me tell you that since 2001, the rate of sanctioning of people on basic income support in the United Kingdom has gone up by over 250%. So that now 24% of people who have received the job seekers allowance in the United Kingdom between 2010 and 2016, 24%, 1 in 4 of those people have received a sanction. What is a sanction? A sanction is money being taken away from you so that you will experience financial hardship because you haven't done something that you were required to do. So you haven't attended a job interview, you haven't taken a job that you were offered, you haven't taken an opportunity that you were given, which in some cases can be a 0-hour contract job, and the state then poses a financial hardship on you, because the idea is then you will be more motivated to take that, to behave in designated ways. And as I said before, the idea that you would sanction someone or impose financial hardship on someone to motivate them to do something is completely out of step with what we do when we provide healthcare, with what we do when we provide education, which is to seek to constitute human development and motivation. So the thought that we are conditioning basic subsistence in the realm of income on people behaving in very particular ways, micromanaging the way that people behave, is completely counterintuitive. So for me, the most important reason to have a basic income is that we learn to govern ourselves in the way that we already committed to in the post-war period when we set up the National Health Service, when we set up and made universal commitments to human development. And I've run out of time, but that's the case I wanted to make today. Thank you.